So you've probably seen the headlines, right? Sri Lanka's economy is recovering. But what does that actually mean on the ground? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on that and look at the real story, the story of the entrepreneur walking a very dangerous tightrope.
And that quote, wow, walking barefoot across a field of broken glass. That's not some analyst in an office, you know? That comes straight from MD LAB, an author and a micro-entrepreneur himself. This isn't theory, it's his lived reality. And honestly, it's the perfect starting point for everything we're about to get into.
All right, so let's do just that. Let's walk on that broken glass for a minute. We're going to look right past the big, glossy national statistics and zoom all the way in on the day-to-day struggle that really defines what this so-called recovery feels like for the little guy.
And I want to be really clear about this. This whole explainer, it's all grounded in MDSMAN's actual experience. We're not looking at this from some 30,000-foot view. No, we're looking at it from the ground up, through the eyes of somebody who's just trying to build something good, something ethical, from scratch.
And boom, here's one of those shards of glass. A 60% increase in electricity and water costs. Now, if you're a massive corporation, okay, that's just a number on a spreadsheet, an expense. But if you're a tiny business, where literally every single rupee counts, that's not an expense. That's a potential death sentence.
And this gets to a really core problem. There's actually a term for it, regressive fiscal stress. It's a fancy way of saying the whole system is basically upside down. The rules are designed so that the smallest players, the ones with the least amount of protection, the least armor, they get hit the hardest. Meanwhile, the big corporations can just shrug it off.
So where do we go from here? Well, it gets deeper. Because these struggles, they're not just a string of bad luck. They're symptoms. Symptoms of a system that's just riddled with invisible walls and hidden traps, especially when you get into the fun worlds of bureaucracy and banking.
Okay, just put yourself in their shoes for a second. You're trying to do everything by the book. You go out of your way to find ethical raw materials, right? You want to compete with the big guys. And what happens? You run smack into a bureaucratic gauntlet. Your shipment gets held up at customs for who knows what reason. Suddenly you're getting hit with storage fees that might even cost more than what you're importing. Then you find out the certifications you need are priced for giants, not for you. And get this, even just registering your logo can drag on and on.
And what does all that boil down to? Well, here's another one of those big, clunky terms, administrative transaction cost asymmetry. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But all it really means is that the cost of playing by the rules is totally rigged. The exact same rule, the same piece of paper, the same fee, it ends up costing a small entrepreneur way more, in time, in stress, in actual money, than it costs a huge corporation.
And this is where it gets really messed up. It creates something the author calls the hustle paradox. Think about that. A paradox where doing everything right, being ethical, being honest, actually gets you punished. So what happens? The system itself pushes you into a corner where bending the rules or breaking them starts to look like the only sane way to survive.
You want to talk about irony? Let's talk about the banks. Because with every single transaction, every little fee they pay, these micro-entrepreneurs are literally funding the very system that is actively trying to crush them. It's just incredible.
And just look at this number, 100 billion rupees. That's the annual profit for just one bank. And where's a big chunk of that coming from? From nickel and diming the smallest players. Tiny fees on ATM withdrawals, SMS alerts, all from people who are scraping by on razor-thin margins. The disconnect is just staggering. So you step back and you look at all this and you have to ask, what does it all mean? If the very foundation of your entrepreneurial class is crumbling, what is a recovery? What have you actually recovered? This is what we mean when we talk about a hollow victory.
Right. This is the real question, isn't it? When you build a system that basically punishes people for doing the right thing, what do you think happens next? What's the long-term damage not just to the economy, but to the very culture of a country?
Well, the consequences are as predictable as they are devastating. Your best people, the ethical innovators, they just burn out. They give up. The whole spirit of entrepreneurship gets poisoned. And then you get what the author calls a brain drain in slow motion. The smart, ambitious people just leave. So, who's left to run the economy? Just the big, entrenched players, the corporate blood that already knows how to game the system. And this isn't a new story. We've seen this exact pattern play out in places from Latin America to Eastern Europe. The end game is often industry capture.
And there it is. That's your hollow victory. The GDP numbers might look great on paper. The reports from on high might be glowing.
But underneath it all, the real economy is becoming fragile, brittle. It's like a beautiful piece of fruit that's been hollowed out from the inside. We've seen this happen before, where you get this weird situation of growth at the very top while everything at street level is just collapsing. It guts the middle class and kills real grassroots innovation.
Okay, so that's all pretty bleak. But this isn't just about pointing out what's broken. The source material is fantastic because it also lays out a path forward, a real roadmap for how to fix this systemically.
And the core idea behind it all is something called glocalization. Now, this isn't protectionism, it's not about building walls, it's actually the opposite. It's about being smarter about globalization. It's saying, hey, if we want to compete on the world stage, we first have to empower our own people, strengthen our own economy from the ground up.
And what's really cool is how practical these ideas are. This isn't some pie-in-the-sky dream. Just take payments, for example. Right now, every time someone swipes a global credit card, a little bit of that money, like a leak in a bucket, flows right out of the country. But what if you had a national payment card? Suddenly, that leak is plugged. The value stays home, transaction costs go down for small businesses, and you build real economic independence. It's a no-brainer.
And that's just one piece of a much bigger blueprint for reform. Imagine this: regulations that are tiered, so a small home business doesn't face the same hurdles as a multinational giant. A special green lane at customs to fast-track ethical importers. Making trade deals that don't hinge entirely on the US dollar. And, maybe most importantly, finally doing a census of these micro-enterprises so policymakers can't pretend they don't exist anymore.
Because at the end of the day, it really all boils down to this. You can't measure a country's economic health just by looking at GDP. The real test, the true measure, is how it treats its smallest, most creative, and most ethical entrepreneurs. Because if you fail them, as this analysis makes crystal clear, you're not just failing them, you are failing your entire country.